Hey there, estate planning attorney Paul Rabalais here, and in this video we're going to talk about what are the new 2021 nursing home long-term care Medicaid rules. In other words, what are the new rules that apply when somebody gets sick, they need long-term care, often in a skilled nursing home facility, and they seek to have their state's Medicaid program pay for that care. All right, so before we get into those numbers and how expensive the care is and when one qualifies for Medicaid and when one has to, fork that money out of pocket to cover the thousands of dollars of monthly expenses, let me give you a little commentary. So here's what I've seen. All right, so pre-2020, this is a before COVID and during and after COVID analysis. So pre-2020, the general public's concept of needing nursing home care in the future for that kind of middle class, most of them would tell me something like, Paul, we don't want to go to a nursing home. We don't like nursing homes. We don't feel like we're going to get very good care if we go into a nursing home. But, Paul, there may come to a point where because of a condition, who knows what the future holds, Paul. There may get to a point where it's just not feasible for me or us, depending upon whether a single person or married couple. It just may not be feasible. As much as we'd like to stay in our home for the rest of our lives, it may not be feasible for us to stay home, and it may be necessary one day for us to go into a nursing home. We don't want that to be the case, and that's a last resort. But if it's necessary, we get it, and we'd like to see if we can protect what little we have in the event that nursing home care is necessary. That was people's opinion in general. Everybody has their own opinion, but that was the opinion in general for people before 2020. Now that COVID has hit, and it's still hitting, people's opinions have changed. It's gone from, we don't want to go to a nursing home, we want to stay at home, but our circumstances may warrant us having to go to a nursing home one day, so we want to be prepared. It's gone from that to, we're going to do everything in our power to stay out of a nursing home, or to keep, mom or dad out of the nursing home, or keep our grandparents out of the nursing home, or keep ourselves out of the nursing home. Because look what COVID did. COVID really hit the senior citizens the most. It spread like crazy. A lot of people in nursing homes passed away, unfortunately. Terrible, terrible, terrible. So it's really increased people's awareness or desire to stay out of those facilities where things like COVID can spread so rapidly and have just terrible consequences. All right, so now with that being the case, let's start gradually getting to what are some of the brand new current 2021 rules. And again, to give you a little background, nursing homes under most people's standards are very expensive. Depending on where you live, it may cost anywhere from about $6,000 a month to $10,000 a month or more just to reside in a nursing home. And if you're a married couple watching this and both spouses go into the nursing home, you can double those numbers. So that's anywhere from $12,000 a month to $20,000 a month or more. Really, just married couples just get slammed when they have to go into a nursing home. And also, in general, the rules are you gotta pay for that yourself. You've got to use all of the money in the bank. You've got to sell all of the assets that you have other than your home and your car. You've got to sell all those non-home, non-car assets in order to cover that expense. And oh, by the way, after you've spent everything other than the home and the car, which they let you keep, then after you die, or after you and your spouse die if you're married, they force the estate to sell the home and the car to be paid back for what Medicaid did spend after you spent all of your other assets. So it's just an awful set of circumstances. The idea here is, you're encouraged to save, but you're going to get a feeling as I go through this video. You're going to probably at some point, you're going to say something like, as I go through the rules and go through how single people and married couples are affected, at some point, you're probably going to say to yourself something like, This just doesn't seem right. The people who spend everything they make or never make anything and never accumulate anything, they just spend, they act irresponsibly, all their care is going to be taken care of by Medicaid because they would qualify for Medicaid to cover the long-term care expense under the asset and income rules that I'm about to go over with you. So that's one way that you'll look at it for the people who act irresponsibly. And then on the other end, you might say, well, if somebody has millions of dollars, they're not likely to lose everything if they need long-term care, but they can pay out of pocket for what care that they have because perhaps they have significant income or perhaps they have significant resources and investments. So the wealthy people don't get hurt typically too bad from long-term care, but that middle class, that's so many Americans out there who have worked their tails off, raised families, maybe, but struggled and may have now saved, may have a home that's paid for, and they may have $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of life savings. They're still, scrimping and saving. Those are the people who really get slammed as a result of long-term care expenses. Those people will lose everything they have. Okay, so with that being said, let's start going through some of the rules. What are the rules? And I will have to warn you, rules can vary from state to state. I live and work in the state of Louisiana, and the way long-term care Medicaid works is Congress makes the rules, and then they tell the states, you can administer your own Medicaid program as long as you fit within the guidelines that Congress requires. So they give states some leeway as long as they follow the federal Medicaid rules. So this can vary. So first, let me go through some of the asset rules. What can you have in terms of assets and if you go into a nursing home, have Medicaid cover that $6,000 to $10,000 expense? Or what is too much assets where Medicaid doesn't cover the expense and you've got to, pay that expense out of your own pocket? So for a single person, a lot of people are familiar with the single person rule. The asset limit is $2,000. And you may think, big whoop, that doesn't go very far, and it doesn't. So, by the way, there are things called exempt assets. The main ones are your house and your car. And then if I went a little further, I'd talk about prepaid funerals and a few other little things. But so the $2,000 does not count the value of your home and your car. So, for example, if grandma goes into the nursing home and she has a home and she has a car and she has $100,000 in her bank accounts, she won't qualify for Medicaid. She'll have to spend the $100,000 that's in her bank accounts until she spends at least $98,000 of that and has less than $2,000 remaining, and then grandma would qualify for Medicaid. And once she spent all of those assets down, then let's say grandma had some monthly income. Let's say it was $1,500 a month, maybe some Social Security, maybe a small pension. Once she qualified based on the asset test, then she would assign her income to the nursing home, and those monthly income payments that she would have been getting would have gone straight to the nursing home. She would get to keep $38 of that each month, which is called her personal needs allowance. But other than that, all of the income goes to the nursing home, and then Medicaid picks up the difference between what her income covers and the cost of the care. So that's the lovely single person rule. That didn't change from 2020 to 2021. That asset limit for single people of $2,000 has been the case for a long time. Now let's look at the worst scenario, which is the married couple and both spouses are in the long-term care facility together. That's the double whammy. So the asset limit for a married couple when both spouses are in the nursing home together, and I'm going to go ahead and just mention it right now, which is a different scenario than the married couple when only one spouse goes into the nursing home. That's very common. I'm going to get to that next. But the married couple when both spouses go into the nursing home, the total assets that they can have other than their house and car is a whopping $3,000. So if that married couple has $250,000 other than their house and their car, because there's two of them in the nursing home facility at the same time, like I said earlier, they'll be spending $12,000 to $20,000 each month because both of them are in the nursing home. and they've got to spend what I mentioned as their $250,000 of countable resources, assets other than their house and their car, and they'd have to spend all that down until they had less than $3,000 of countable resources, and then Medicaid would pay for the nursing home there, subject to them having to use their income and assign it to the nursing home. They get to keep the $38 personal needs allowance, and then Medicaid picks up the difference. Oh, by the way, I mentioned it earlier, under that scenario where they had a house and a car and $250,000, and they spent their $250,000 down to less than $3,000, started qualifying for Medicaid, assigning their income to the nursing home. Medicaid picks up the difference. Now Medicaid is going to have its estate recovery rights so that after both spouses pass away, Medicaid can force the sale of that home to be reimbursed for what Medicaid paid for after the couple spent all of their countable resources. So that's a double whammy there, because for married couples, what married couples, kind of middle class, could even envision having to spend $12,000 to $20,000 a month to, get the kind of care that people get in a nursing home facility? But it's so maybe even more reason to get yourself informed and maybe even take some action to get yourself prepared. But those are the rules. All right, and the $3,000 rule for married couples when both are in the nursing home, that didn't change from 2020 to 2021. Now we go through a couple of rules that have changed. A lot of these, how much you have in assets, how much can you have in income, those rules get adjusted annually for inflation. So now I'm going to go through the very common scenario of a married couple and only one spouse needs the long-term care in, let's say, a nursing home facility. The other spouse can stay at home, can stay in their apartment, perhaps can stay in an assisted living facility, which is different from a nursing home. But only one spouse is in a nursing home institution. For Medicaid purposes, that spouse who is in the nursing home institution is called an institutionalized spouse. And the other spouse who is not in the nursing home, but is in the home or is in an apartment or is in an assisted living facility, they're living out in the community. Oh, by the way, they're called a community spouse because they're living in the community and they're not living in a nursing home institution. Okay, so those, there's a little bit of a break, little more leniency there. Oh, great, you might say. So the reason for the leniency is because you've got a spouse who's not in the nursing home and they've got to have something to live off of. So it's called the Community Spouse Resource Allowance. So it's how much in assets can a spouse who's living in the community have, and the institutionalized spouse would have Medicaid cover the nursing home expense. So let me just give you the number real quick. For 2021, this, what I call Community Spouse Resource Allowance, is $130,380. For 2020, it was $128,640. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have a married couple and one spouse gets sick. That spouse has to go to the nursing home to get the kind of care that they need. And that couple has a home and a car and they have $250,000. Is Medicaid going to pay for that spouse who went into the nursing home? Is Medicaid going to pay that $6,000 to $10,000 nursing home expense? No, they're not. It's got to be paid entirely by that couple because they have $250,000 of countable resources. And the Community Spouse Resource Allowance for 2021 is $130,380. So they'd have to spend that $250,000 down to less than the $130,380, actually $132,380, because the spouse who's still at home can have $130,380, and the spouse who's in the institution can have up to $2,000. So they would have to pay for that care out of their own pocket until they spent their resources down to that limit, and then Medicaid would cover that expense or a portion of that expense. And I say a portion because now maybe the last complicated rule, stay with me, has to do with the income that that couple has. And so we have something from an income standpoint that's called the spouse's maintenance needs, or maintenance needs allowance. I'm gonna call it the spouse's maintenance needs. It's how much income can the community spouse keep without having to, send it to the nursing home. So let me give you a number and then let me give you an example. For 2021, the amount of income that is allowable for the spouse's maintenance needs totals $3,259.50. For 2020, it was, it's gone up a little bit from $3,216 of monthly income. All right, so let's go back to our example, kind of put it all together under this married couple with an institutionalized spouse and a community spouse. Let's use the same example I just used a moment ago. Married couple, $250,000 of countable resources, plus they have a home and a car, and one spouse goes into the nursing home, one spouse stays at home. Under the asset test, do they qualify? Nope, because they have $250,000. They can only have $130,380. So one spouse goes into the nursing home. They spend those assets down to less than $130,380. And now the institutionalized spouse qualifies for Medicaid. So now under the asset rule, now we have to look at the income rule. And the income rule, which is based on the name on the check as far as which spouse does that income get allocated to. Under our spouse's maintenance needs rules, the community spouse, the spouse at home, gets to keep all of the income that is payable to that community spouse. It takes about 10 times for people to understand this. So if the community spouse has a pension and Social Security, whether it's $1,000 or whether it's $7,000 a month, the community spouse gets to keep all of the income that's payable to the community spouse. And then if the community spouse's monthly income is less than $3,259.50 each month, then the community spouse gets to keep enough of the institutionalized spouse's income to get that community spouse up to the $3,259.50 monthly limit. So if the community spouse had $3,000 of monthly income and the institutionalized spouse had $2,000 of monthly income, the community spouse would get to keep all of their income because the community spouse always gets to keep all of their income. But since the community spouse's income was $3,000, which is less than the $3,259.50, then the community spouse would get to keep $259.50 of the institutionalized spouse's income, and then the rest of the institutionalized spouse's income would be assigned to the nursing home, and then Medicaid would cover the remainder of that monthly nursing home expense for the institutionalized spouse. Boy, is that a mouthful. You may need to watch this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times to really get it. But, we're doing the best we can. And oh, by the way, if you don't like these rules, I'm going to ask you, don't blame the messenger. My goal here is just to introduce these rules to you so that you can get yourself informed. And then if you choose to do so, take some appropriate action if necessary and if permissible and if the rules allow it, so that you can better keep what you have and protect what you have and arrange things so that an illness doesn't bankrupt you. Okay, so a couple of other rules that I think are important. One is I keep talking about it's okay to have a home and a car. You can qualify for Medicaid with your home and your car. And so if you have a home and you're single and you only have $1,000 of other assets, you're going to qualify for Medicaid. However, there are some home equity limits. So this really doesn't apply very often because often those people who are applying for Medicaid, they don't have a very expensive home, but they could. And I've seen it where they do sometimes. So there's a limit. They tell you can't go out and buy $1 million home and then have Medicaid cover your nursing home expense. Not a bad thought, but it just doesn't work. So we have home equity limits. How much equity can you have in your home and still qualify for Medicaid? So for 2021, the home equity limit is $603,000. For 2020, it was $595,000. So just be aware of that. We do have a limit as to how valuable your home can be, or really, what are the home equity limits, or how much equity can you have in your home. All right, couple of other rules, some rules that people thought changed but didn't. I'm going to talk next real quick about the uncompensated transfer rule. So for the last, probably, let's see, at least a dozen years, we've had rules that say if you transferred assets out of your name, it's called an uncompensated transfer. If you did that within 5 years of applying for Medicaid, it's going to cause a Medicaid eligibility problem. A lot of people talk to me during the past year and say, Paul, I know that the 5-year penalty period rule, that changed. It got lengthened to 7 years. And they came in just adamant about it. So adamant that I was like, geez, they seem so certain of themselves. I have to go double check and triple check the rule. But it didn't change. And it's 5 years, and it's still 5 years for 2021. So there's no new law on that, but it's just something that a lot of people don't know about. I'm throwing it in on this video because even though it's not new for 2021, a lot of people don't know about it. So I want to kind of throw it out there. When somebody applies for Medicaid, there's a Medicaid application process that the person who's going into a nursing home, or perhaps a family member for them, completes to attempt to qualify for Medicaid. Part of that lengthy Medicaid application process involves a question that says, have you, or the Medicaid applicant, has the Medicaid applicant made any transfers of assets out of their name, for less than fair market value in the previous 5 years? And if the answer to that question is yes, then you got a problem with Medicaid eligibility. And this is where tax laws and Medicaid laws, people get them confused, because sometimes people yeah, I during the last 5 years, every year I give my children $15,000 each because that's what my accountant said I could do without any consequences. And the accountant was right. There aren't any tax consequences to transferring $15,000 to as many people as you want to every year. But that causes some major adverse Medicaid consequences. The idea behind trying to protect assets for Medicaid is it doesn't do any good to try to get things out a little at a time, $15,000 at a time, because if you're transferring $15,000 out of your name every year to as many people as you want to, at some point you're going to try to apply for Medicaid in a nursing home. They're going to ask you if you transferred anything out of your name in the last 5 years, and you're going to say, yeah, I've been making these $15,000 transfers, and then that causes a huge problem for Medicaid. So for Medicaid purposes, you got to get it all out of your name, and then you got to wait 5 years. So you got to get it all out of your name before you're sick, and then just have things titled correctly, and then just let it sit there. And then 5 years later or beyond, if you go in a nursing home, have you made any transfers out of your name in the last 5 years? You could say no, and perhaps you qualify for Medicaid. So now, what does it mean to give it out of your name? That makes people worry because, and it should make people worry because people think, justifiably so, that if you're taking everything out of your name, then you're losing control over that. And who knows, if you put it in your child's name, your grandchild's name, who knows what's going to happen to it after you get it out of your name and put it in their name. They could spend it, they could do something stupid, they could pass away, they could get divorced. So lots of problems there. So instead of what most people do from a Medicaid planning standpoint of just, instead of putting things in their children's name outright, as I call it, they often create certain what I'll call family trusts, just in order to retain more control over those assets after those assets are transferred out of your name. Quick note there, the typical avoid probate revocable living trust isn't the kind of trust you can transfer assets to get this Medicaid or long-term care protection. It has to be other, fairly customized and personalized trusts that prohibit you from removing the principal from that trust and putting it back in your name. So that's a whole nother video that I'll have to do and have done, and you could search on my channel for more on that. So just wanted to give you an update of these key rules that changed for 2021, the community spouse resource allowance, the monthly maintenance needs. Again, both of those rules apply to married couples when one spouse goes into a nursing home. The home equity limit now of $603,000. A lot of the other rules stayed the same. The $2,000 amount for single person assets, the 5-year rule for transferring assets out of your name. Hope that helps. Stay tuned as things change, and I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of changes in 2021. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. Give it a like, and we'll see you next time. Y'all take care.